Welcome to Enterprise Design's Industry Insights, where we identify key topics in the commercial real estate industry. I'm Ann Weston, Director of Design Services.
And I'm Jessica Green, Director of Client Services. For this series, we're discussing market trends with Dallas-based commercial real estate professionals.
Well, thank you guys for joining us today. We're here with Mike Silliman with Properties. Mike, we're so happy to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm excited to be here.
Great. So to start us off, we're going to ask you a little bit of a personal question. Can you tell us a little about your role at Properties, how long you've been in the industry, and how you came to your current role?
At Properties, I'm the Senior Vice President of Leasing for Dallas, and then I handle all the marketing for the firm. We're a small, I'd call us boutique operation, owner-operator. I've been with the firm for 7 years now, and ended up working, Ken Michalski owns the firm. He's the MM and the Properties piece. And so came to him to work on Comerica Bank Tower downtown originally. So it was a great, just good connection. I just finished working for Mike Ablon, where we had rebranded Ross Tower and leased it and sold it. So it was a good transition over to Comerica Bank Tower to work with Ken. So.
Wonderful. So what keeps you in this industry? What do you like most about the commercial real estate industry?
Well, I always tell people I'm blessed that every morning I get up, I get to go do a job I love. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I love real estate. I just like the tangible component of it, you know, seeing a project come together and, you know, whether you're redeveloping a building or developing a building or building out a space or whatever it is. I love that aspect of it. I love the aspect that you're never doing the same thing twice. You know, I don't, every deal's different. Everything comes together differently. In my role, I get to work on the marketing. In the leasing, you're negotiating leases, you're making presentations. So there's a sales element, there's a legal element, there's a creative element. And so it's just fun. And we're really fortunate to be in a business that has a lot of good people. So you know.
So in like top of the relationships, it's also great because it's different every day and it's exciting.
Yeah.
You know, to see like a lot of different stuff that goes on in our industry.
And
sometimes they're like, wow.
Yeah, and absolutely. And like a lot of my friends are, you know, people I've met in the business. Yes. and that we've become friends outside of just the business deal, which makes it really nice.
Which I think is really great about our industry. And I think that's what drives a lot of people to love this industry is because of the relationships too, because I have friends in different industries and it's not the same. Right. Like these are friends that I built in this industry, like long-term friendships.
Right.
So it's great. So.
Well, my first job in a business was with Bill Colley. Mm-hmm. And I learned there that this is a relationship business and everything you're doing is always building on the next deal. You know, everything you're doing now rolls forward. So.
Absolutely.
Well, and I love that Properties is more of, you know, that boutique firm. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to us a little bit about, you know, it sounds like you wear a lot of hats, what that looks like, you know, how you work with the people internally with Properties, you know, because you have a lot of departments that are more investment ownership side. You still have property management. You know, what does that look like?
Yeah, we're a completely vertically integrated real estate company. Now, if you took the pieces of the people that we have at our firm, majority of all of us have large institutional experience. You take Ken Michalski, for instance. He's a development partner at Hines. He developed one Galleria in the West End here, in a great building, 500 Burleston in Boston. And then, you know, was at Crescent, ran their acquisition and development group. And then when Crescent went private, he started MM. So he kind of has an overall background of almost everything in the business. And then the people that he's brought on are people that have, you know, similar experience. Take me, for instance, Hines background, Crescent background as well. So being a small group, when we're looking at something in Dallas, well, I'm the leasing and marketing guy, but I'm going to go look at the property. I'll help with the underwriting. We'll talk about what the capital improvements need to look like. And then we have an acquisitions person who, you know, runs all the numbers and does that component of it. And then you have the property management group, which is critical to our business because you have to, you know, if you're in this business, you don't realize it's a service business, you're in the wrong business. because that's the heart of what it is. So you've got to be providing great customer service, all the way through the group. And that's why when I say we're completely vertically integrated, we want to make sure an employee is the touch point for the customer at all the points, from property management to leasing to, when we're trying to buy a building.
Right.
So
That's great.
Absolutely.
So another question, how do you navigate building purchases and support your capital investments within M Properties?
yeah, our approach is probably a qualitative approach. On a quantitative basis, we're looking at all of the data that we can pull out. We'll just take Dallas, for instance. So we look at the submarkets that have the best absorption rates, and then we start to see how that's trending, because that's telling you where tenants are moving to, so it's telling you where tenants want to be. So then we kind of take that and look within that submarket and say, where's the best real estate in that submarket? And as those opportunities come up, know that those are the ones you want to focus on. And it could be a combination of just a great asset. For instance, we were in the finals for McKinney and Olive when it just sold in Uptown. So you look at Uptown, that's a great submarket, a lot of absorption. McKinney and Olive, one of the top buildings in the submarket. So that kind of tells you that's where you want to be. You want to find great real estate in that market, or find what can be great real estate in that market, as is the case with our current redevelopment of International Plaza 3.
Right.
So.
Well, I love that you're kind of vertically based, within your company and, service minded. Does that help you, here in Dallas, and the knowledge that you have in Dallas that, you really are boots on the ground at every level? Does that help you kind of know what's happening in Dallas more seamlessly?
Yeah, it really is a good, it keeps there from being any filters of the information. Yeah. When you're getting your information from a third party, sometimes maybe they give you 90% of the information, and maybe they filter off the pieces that you don't want to hear. And since we have such a flat structure, we're all talking about everything that's happening, and it just allows you to have better decision making and quicker decision making, because there's no superfluous data in there. We're all talking about what we think is happening and how that impacts the asset depending on where it is. On the property management level, I think that could come out a little faster. On the acquisition level, it's numbers are kind of numbers, and you're looking at things like that. But on the property management side, if you have a third-party property management group, they might want to try to solve the problems before they get to you. Whereas, and then sometimes the problems just get bigger, unfortunately. But for us, we're always talking about what's going on at that property level, and all the way through the chain, from which I think is a fun project, or a differentiator for us, is that, Ken Michalski is a unbelievable real estate professional, and he's working on all these projects. So
Great.
What are the most common issues that you see with buildings that were initially constructed for a single user and now being multi-tenanted?
when I think about that, when you think about a single building facility, generally it's built for a tenant because they have a specific need that they can't accommodate somewhere else in the market. So you're probably you're going to be looking at some property that has a specificity to it that was designed for a single user. And then you're going to have to figure out, okay, how do I make that work for somebody else? The next challenge you generally find probably the most times is that the single tenant group has had it for 10 or 15 years. So you're 10 or 15 years behind trend of what's happening. So then you've got, so you got to kind of work that element in. And generally those issues end up being the floor plate, the ceiling height, kind of structural kind of things that are hard to work around. And then you got, work through some of the other elements about, how you could repurpose some of the space and the amenities. And real fortunate on mine, when I was at McGuire, we had the Solana campus out in South Lake and West Lake. 1.1 million square feet, IBM campus, IBM's leaving. We go, and we were fortunate enough that project had a data center component at a cafeteria and 6 office buildings. So we were able to multi-tenant the data center with different users. And then we were able to get a large tenant to come in and take 4 of the office buildings and take the amenity, the cafeteria building, and redo the cafeteria and then create a conference and executive area out of that. So that kind of created a campus for them inside that.
Which makes it nice when it's a property like that versus some that you kind of are like, we really have to think outside the box here if we do want to multi-tenant, or is it too complicated to do that, and should we wait for a single user to continue to?
Yeah, and I think that's a discussion people are making when they're investing in,
Right.
making these purchase decisions is, do you wait for that one single user to come along, which, that's a tough, it's a tough, that's a
topic
tough
right now
deal.
is that it has been talked about. It's like you're seeing, and we're hearing it both ways. Every once in a while, but these like large tenants coming in, you see them every once in a while, but it's not as frequently as before because of a hybrid model with work. So they're like, do I really need to take, 50,000, 100,000, 200,000 square feet of space?
And the challenge you have on a big user like that is if they're not time constrained, well, they're probably going to want to go build their own, custom made specific building for what they want to do. If they have a time constraint, then you're would have an advantage, but it's a challenge. I mean, we looked at the JCPenney campus, and it's a very challenging project when you see the floor plate size and the way it's all connected, and when you're thinking about how do I go in here and because even when you're doing multi-tenanting a campus deal like that, you're probably still looking for large users who are going to need identity. They're going to need some sense that this is my building, so that you're going to have to carve out that element multiple times. So it can be a real challenge for sure.
And just having to predict what is going to be best for that building at the end of the day.
Exactly.
So that's where it can be challenging, especially in the world we live in with constant challenges.
Yeah,
around the block.
change is pretty constant, right now.
Absolutely.
Well, and those larger floor plates, they really are very difficult. And, we've looked at buildings that, even have, not necessarily one central elevator bank. And, point of entry to the building really isn't very clear. And, with that being a single use building initially and now needing to be multi-tenanted, the capital to really make it a successful case study for multi-tenanting one of those larger floor plates, it makes it really difficult when you do have those entry points that are kind of across the square footage of the floor, and I think that's kind of cost prohibitive to new owners coming in. Have you seen any of that where it really is cost prohibitive to make it a multi-tenant, so then you kind of just back away from the deal?
Yeah, I mean, we've looked at a couple of projects that we just couldn't figure out how they were going to work at the end of the day. And that doesn't mean that, I'm sure somebody can. It's just, like I said, we're a small shop. So when we start thinking about what we're going to work on, we've got to say, hey, we got to have a plan, and we got to have a good probability of outcome on that plan, And so when you're taking shots like that, those are because you're elephant hunting, you're looking for big tenants, which is fine. But when you're in a market, if demand is off and people aren't making big decisions like that, it could be a real challenge. It's one of the elements of some of the existing real estate that's hard to kind of put together.
So another question is, what are some of the most common challenges you face when leasing commercial properties?
Today I think the one of the big challenges is keeping your building relevant to what today's tenant wants. And that target's moving pretty fast as people are, experiencing, because I think office space has moved into where hospitality and residential has been for a long time, which it's experiential now. You have to be creating an environment that people want to be in, that you're, as I say all the time now, I'm not competing with just the other buildings in my submarket. I'm competing with people's houses. I got to create something that makes somebody say, hey, you know what? I'll go to the office today, rather than I'll just stay home. And so I think it's getting the programming right on the amenities and just staying in touch with what people want. in today's market. Hospitality groups, I don't know if all of them do, but when I was at McGuire and we had the Marriott there, they escrow funds to renovate every 7 years because they know that they'll have to renovate the property every so often to stay relevant, so the design still looks modern. And I think that may be where we end up heading on the office space is that you're going to have to be thinking ahead all the time about, hey, what am I offering here that even the timeless architecture buildings, I think it's still the amenity programming that you've got to kind of dial in and keep working on it as you're.
Yeah, and I think that comment that you made, the escrow where, you are going to be updating, more regularly is very interesting because, conversations with clients about, their amenities and their common area spaces that, really make that impact now for tenants coming in, their expectation that it is going to last, 10, 15, even 20 years. But, with kind of the future being expedited at this point, it's hard to say. We can plan with flexibility. We can plan with, kind of innovation and, all of these things in mind. But at the end of the day, really, who knows what the future is going to hold for us. And, if that changes, hopefully we'll have some idea of what those changes are. Technology is huge, making sure that everything is seamless. And, if you need something new with technology, that it's really easy to incorporate. So, we are seeing a lot of those challenges. And, I think it's really interesting the point that you make that, the renovations actually may be quicker.
Yeah, well, and who knows? It may go in building sales because everybody's hold periods may be getting condensed a little bit. So every time somebody buys a building, I think they want to figure out how to come in and improve the product offering to some level. Right. But I do think that's something that you have to kind of continually be thinking about, and hopefully you're making good investments. And there's still there are always your cafe, your conference center, your fitness studio. You still may have to improve those and upgrade them, but some of the core functions are still always going to, want to execute at the building.
Right.
Absolutely. Speaking of capital improvements in different classes of buildings, what is the biggest differences in capital improvements between the Class A plus buildings versus other class buildings in the Dallas submarket? Because you're really having to compete on all different levels. What is making these top of the line, difference? Because B sometimes has the cafe, the lobby, all of these things.
Yeah, I think a lot of it probably plays off location to start with, because I think they've got to be, it's amazing in this submarket, or any submarket, maybe in any submarket, I don't know, I'm just familiar with Dallas, where a 2-block difference, makes a lot of difference. If you're 2 blocks off the tollway, that's a totally different building than the building that's on the tollway. So I think you start there, and so those buildings tend to probably be maybe a little bit better buildings to start with.
Right.
And so they're in a better location, they're a little bit better building to start with, they can get higher rents, so they can probably afford to make an investment. It's the calculated risk of the investment is better if you say, hey, if I go in and really improve my asset here, I think I can move the leasing up. Right. Which I think that's another thing that I think owners are looking at now and saying, hey, it's not just the cost of this and the rental rate I'll get, but it's also the velocity at which I can lease the space. Because if I have space to lease, and it doesn't matter if I can't get it, there's a certain element of time involved in all of it that you want to get at least in a certain time. And so I think it's interesting that we've seen, just on the lower tollway, we've seen some really big renovations.
It's funny you say that. In my real estate classes, they were like location, 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 and timing, timing, timing. Yeah. And so it's just, and it's hard sometimes getting all of
I'm
this.
trying to figure out which one of those I'd like to have more of, but I think they're both pretty equally weighted. Exactly. relative to success. Mm-hmm. So. And I think I've always been a location guy, but I've always thought it's location relative to labor, or relative to some kind of landmark catalyst for you being there. And then what used to be lesser now, more of in the past, it was location to executive housing. When I first got in the business, it was find out where the president lives and start looking close to his house, because that's where you're probably going to end up. And I've seen that play out hundreds of times. But I think now we've seen a little bit of shift in the market that maybe tenants are looking at their total labor pool and saying, hey, where's the most convenient point that we can get to for the total labor pool?
That's interesting.
So I don't think it shifts totally away from where the president lives, but I'm saying it's moving. It's moved a little bit.
Thank you for tuning in to Enterprise Design's Industry Insights video podcast. Please follow us and subscribe to our channel or visit us on our website at enterprisedesign.com.
And look for our teaser video highlighting the next episode. We look forward to seeing you then.